The French have a phrase, joie de vivre, the joy of living. At Alliance Francaise in Washington, D.C., that spirit is right here in your city. Language classes, cultural events, a community that makes French feel like home. And this summer, kids can dive into French immersion camps with weekly themes and field trips. And when you become a member, you save on all of it. Classes, camps, and events all year long. So discover your joie de vivre at francedc.org. That's francedc.org.
Today on CityCast DC, I'm talking with Josef Palermo. He is the author of an explosive recent piece in The Atlantic. It recounts what he saw in his 10 months as a senior staffer at the Kennedy Center. Palermo is an interesting case because he was actually hired by the new leadership that came in after Donald Trump took over. But that didn't stop him from being aghast at the ineptitude and financial shenanigans he witnessed. We had an entertaining talk, and I hope you listen in. Today is Wednesday, May 6th. I'm Michael Schaefer. Here's what DC's talking about. Before we get into the show, I'm here with my co-host and friend, Bridget Todd. Hi, Bridget.
Hey, Mike. How's it going?
It's going good. And hey, we're in our spring membership campaign, which means we need people's support as we continue to expand our newsroom.
That's right. And I know you and I talk about this all the time, but it is in some ways, both a challenging and also exciting time here in DC, especially when it comes to local media. And so to me, it seems like supporting the local media that folks actually feel like makes the city a better place to live, a smarter place to live, a more informed place to live is very important right now.
So like when we started CityCast, Bridget, remember that? It was just you and me. And here's what we did to gather news. We read things that other people wrote and reported. And a lot of those other people have lost their jobs. I mean, it's a really sad and difficult thing. And one of the cool things that CityCast is doing this year is actually hiring real journalists to bring some of that news gathering in-house. We're going to be having people cover City Hall, cover real estate and development, cover life, eating and dining around DC, and only growing from there.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. If I can be petty and mean for a minute, I know that you know this.
Why stop at a minute?
You're like, I know that you can. I have seen it. I'm a techie, and the idea that people are floating around these days that somehow AI could replace the kinds of stuff that you were just talking about, that AI could go and actually break news, get scoops, do the kind of, on-the-ground reporting that our folks like Emma Uber are doing, like literally staying up late to break actual news and research and report actual stories. The idea that AI could replace that makes me so infuriated. And so if you find that infuriating as I do, put your money where your anger is, pretend that's an expression, and become a member of CityCast DC.
Yeah, I mean, AI, I guess it probably could replace me because all I do is show up and talk pretty. But I now working with and helping lead this team of like pretty amazing reporters we're building. And it is, news gathering is expensive, often frustrating work. You dig a lot of dry holes. But it is necessary for someone to keep tabs on the people who have like power over us because they're our government or because they are leaders of our culture or our industry. And it's really cool to be back in the business of having some of that as members of my team, of our team. So, I grew up here. I've spent my career, I'm weird. I've worked both sides of the street between like lowercase w, hometown DC, and capital W, Washington. And it has been, just the amount of competition that there was on the hometown front has really shrunk because so many outlets have dried up and reduced and so on. It's not to say that the individual reporters aren't working just as hard as they ever were, but there's a lot less, and it's really gratifying to see the people who sign our paychecks investing in building more of that.
And you can join that important investment just by becoming a member. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year. You can do that at membership.citycast.fm. And if you're not someone who just does things because you want warm fuzzies or you want to support good journalism, you also get a cool thing, which is a very cool tote bag.
Which one do you have, Bridget?
I have both.
They didn't give me one.
You didn't get one?
No.
Okay, we'll talk offline because you need to get one. They actually are like genuinely
Do you think
very
they're trying to send me a message?
Yes, I do. we want Mike to have to carry his stuff loose in his hands, loose papers under his arm, no totes for him. Well, as someone who actually was deemed important enough to get a tote, there's two styles. One says DC deserves local news. You might have seen it on our Instagram, held by reporter Kayla on our Instagram. It's very striking. There's another that says for the love of DC. It's a little more funky and a little more colorful. Honestly, I know a tote bag. These are good tote bags.
But look, you get a tote bag, you get access to members-only events where you'll get to hang out with the likes of Bridget and me. But looking forward, what we're doing is we're building a network of newsletters, and some of that stuff is going to be stuff that you got to be a member to read. And some of those things that you will miss if you're not a member are going to be really important scoops and kind of must-read pieces of advice about how to manage DC. So you got to sign up. It's only $10 a month.
And you can join super cool people like Susie W., who said, "It's simple. We need to support local news. With your commitment to grow CityCast after the Washington Post made their last cutback, it was time for me to support your endeavor. I read CityCast every morning. Love the brevity." Thank you, Susie, for becoming a member.
Thank you, Susie. And if you want to shout out just like Susie, you too ought to join. Hey, Joseph, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So you wrote this blistering piece about your time at the Kennedy Center. And I thought what was really remarkable about it, and one of the reasons it's so memorable, is that you are not like some Kennedy Center lifer. You actually joined under the Trump-installed leadership. How did that happen? How'd you wind up there?
Yeah, so I had been working with a different nonprofit on a public art project for the National Mall for 2026, the 250th anniversary of America. And the private foundation that was funding that project, in the wake of the 2024 election results, decided to, just withdraw their investment in the project, reevaluate their funding priorities. So that was March of 2025. And that was around the time that I had noticed the new leadership coming into the Kennedy Center. So I basically just cold called and pitched this project that I had been working on. I didn't want it to be homeless. I wanted to still, create it. And I got called in rather for a pitch meeting. I pitched the project
to who?
One of Rick Grinnell's deputies at the Kennedy Center. At the end of this pitch meeting, I was told, we'd love to have your project, but we'd also love to have you. Rick Grinnell, as part of his leadership of the Kennedy Center, is looking to establish a visual arts program to sort of expand the offerings of the Kennedy Center so that people who visit have something to see and experience when there isn't a show happening at the time of their visit. So I thought that was an interesting proposition, but I also made sure to tell them, I don't want to waste your time or mine. I'm not a Trump voter. I've never been a Trump voter. I will never be a Trump voter. If that's a deal breaker in any way, we can just, simply part ways amicably. And it was nice speaking with you. And so the response that I got to that was, we don't want to hire only MAGA loyalists. Rick Grinnell has been positioning the Kennedy Center as a place that's welcoming for all Americans, regardless of their politics. Your position would be working for the trust, the Kennedy Center Trust, which is a separate 501c3 that administers the programming and operations of the building itself. It's not a politically appointed position. So I felt comfortable with that. Then the next question I had was around creative control. As an artist, artistic integrity is very important to me, and I certainly didn't want to come on board to be anybody's propagandist. And so I asked about, it's my understanding if you're hiring me for my creative output. I want to be able to have creative control over my projects. And I was assured of that in a way that, even objectively to this day, they did keep.
What was your title? And literally what were you supposed to be doing all day?
So I was the curator of visual arts and special programming. So I had domain over the permanent collection at the Kennedy Center. I was also responsible for developing exhibitions, temporary exhibitions that could come to the Kennedy Center, and then just trying to integrate visual arts into the other aspects of programming that were happening at the Kennedy Center.
So at this time, the first half of 2025, when you go in there, the new Trump installed leadership is sort of being pilloried for two things. One is for, according to critics, being a bunch of propagandists, MAGA diehards who want to sort of hijack the culture. But two, they were pilloried because, very few of them had a whole lot of arts organization experience. And, these places are complicated to run. In your piece, it was the second thing that you noticed first. Tell me about what you see that made you think we may not be ready for prime time here.
Yeah, the initial red flags I had were really around the fundraising and the approaches that were being taken with respect to fundraising. It became apparent to me, starting with the Les Miserables preview performances, especially the one where Donald Trump was in the building in the show, and they were charging upwards of $2 million to sit near him and to attend a private VIP reception with him. And even orchestra level seats for that same performance were going for $100,000. It became obvious to me very quickly that they were essentially selling access to Donald Trump in the name of fundraising. And I continued to see that over the next span of several months. There was also a dinner with J.D. Vance and his wife at the Naval Observatory for $250,000 a seat.
Okay, what did that dinner have to do with the Kennedy Center?
So the Washington National Opera at that time was still a resident company of the Kennedy Center. The second lady, she used to be a board member, even as a senator's wife. She was still a board member of the opera. When Rick Grinnell came in, he moved her to the Kennedy Center Board of Trustees. They were basically selling access to the administration at the highest levels in the name of fundraising. And there were conversations that were had internally among the staff where we weren't entirely sure whether or not kickbacks were being given to members of the Trump family or even the Vances for participating in things like this.
That is a crazy story. How would you have been able to tell that?
Because it's common, apparently, in political campaign fundraising. And I had been told by one of Rick Grinnell's deputies that they were very clearly grafting, political management strategies into a non-political organization. Just based on that, there was definitely speculation as to whether or not there were kickbacks for appearance fees or something like that.
What was the mood like and the atmosphere like among the senior staffers? I mean, they told you they didn't want just loyalists and political allies, but they had installed a largely new team, and a lot of the old team up and quit, which gave them even more hires than a new leadership would ordinarily get to make. What were these people like?
On an interpersonal level, they were very friendly. They were nice. I'm the type of person where I try to be collegial. I try to maintain a professional work environment regardless. When it came to their roles, they were just not equipped to do these roles. Speaking specifically of Lisa Dale, who was the Senior Vice President of Development, she was tasked with fundraising. She did not like to pick up the phone to make calls to donors.
That seems like kind of a basic task of fundraising, huh?
Correct. There was a meeting that someone junior to her had scheduled with an executive at a major airline company to be a corporate sponsor for programming. And, she canceled that meeting within 3 hours of it happening. So just missteps like that were indicative of how the senior team just were not ready for these roles and really didn't, in my view, seem to care about not having the experience. They were really just there as cronies to collect paychecks. And many of them had extracurricular activities that they were doing with Rick Grinnell, and his various other ventures related to PACs and political campaigns.
What do you mean extracurricular activities?
So he runs some PACs. He also, does deals, international deals with different figures in different countries.
Let's move from money for a second, because I know it'll come back because it's a big piece of this story, to your actual work on the art collection. At one point, you write that Grinnell tells you to get rid of everything in the permanent collection. What's in it, and what were you supposed to do?
So last things first, what's in the collection? So when the Kennedy Center opened over 50 years ago, in the name of cultural diplomacy, which is something that, President Kennedy himself was a huge champion of, many different countries from around the world donated gifts to the American people, artistic gifts to the American people via the Kennedy Center. So in this collection, I use the lounges as an illustration to this point. There are different country lounges in the Kennedy Center. For example, the African Room was just over 30, I believe, African countries came together to sponsor this space. And in that room were various handmade textiles from different tribes throughout the continent of Africa. There was a sculpture from Ghana that represented the collective Africans' grief upon the assassination of President Kennedy. There were beautiful hand-carved doors from 700-year-old wood that depicted Yoruban village scenes. These are examples of some of the art that are in the permanent collection of the Kennedy Center. And when Rick Grinnell called me into his office shortly after President Trump's Truth Social announcement that he was going to be closing the Kennedy Center for 2 years, the directive that I was given was to get rid of everything, meaning the art collection, because we, being the Kennedy Center, wanted to have new art for the reopening.
By get rid of, did he mean like put it in the dumpster, or like find an appropriate museum to share it with?
Yeah, so he didn't seem that concerned with what happened to it. There are some works, for example, that are installed outside, sculptures that had to be dug into the ground for stability and to secure them. He had mentioned going to those countries that donated those gifts and having them foot the bill for excavating the work and then getting it off-site.
Wait, so developing countries in Africa give these gifts to the Kennedy Center upon its founding, sometimes reflecting their grief at Kennedy's death. And now he's saying, go back to these governments that are not, flush with cash and have them pay us to get the thing out of here?
That's correct. Yeah, there's a sculpture of Don Quixote outside that Spain had gifted. That's an example of one that would have needed to be excavated and Spain would have had to pay for.
If you're not using Today Ticks to plan your next night out, what are you waiting for? Today Ticks has deals on all the hottest events at your favorite venues in the DMV, like Arena Stage, Signature Theater, Shakespeare Theater Company, and more. All tickets are verified, and with exclusive discounts and last-minute rush tickets, you'll find deals you can't get anywhere else. Plus, you'll earn rewards like ticket protection and Tix Cash just for using the app. You can even set an alert for events that aren't available yet, so you're ready to book tickets to the best events, like Pippin at the Signature Theater or Othello at the Shakespeare Theater Company the second they go live. Visit todaytix.com/CityCastDC or download the app to impress all of your friends by being the first to know about what's happening in your city.
Those hot DC summer days are coming, and when they do, your AC is going to be running nonstop, and your utility bills are going to show it. But don't wait for the heat to hit. The pros at Window Nation can help you replace your old, drafty windows with custom-built, energy-efficient ones at prices you'll love. Right now, Window Nation's Buy 4, Get 4 free sale is going on. That means you could replace every window in your house and get half of them free. Plus, 0 down and no payments or interest for 2 full years. Plus, Window Nation offers a lifetime warranty on all their windows, so you can relax knowing your home is protected far into the future. The sale ends soon. Schedule your free consultation today at windownation.com.
Hey, Bridget Todd here, one of the hosts of CityCast DC. We're in the middle of our spring membership campaign where we ask you, our listeners, to support this show and the newsroom that we're building in this city by becoming a CityCast DC neighbor. Trust me when I say that being a neighbor comes with great perks, like ad-free listening, weekly bonus content just for members, and invites to exclusive events. So all that stuff is great, but even more than that, member support is the financial fuel that we need to keep showing up for our city. And here's a little taste of why your actual neighbors support this show. Matt H. says, reliable local journalism is essential for developing community and holding people in power accountable. Matt, that is the truth, Jake H. says. I love the local approach to journalism and understanding that news in this city is more than just what happens between the Hill and the White House. You said it, Jake H. And Katie K says, I'm a small business owner in DC who wants to support other local initiatives, and CityCast is one of the best ways to stay plugged into what's going on in my city. Thank you, Katie K. So to join these fine folks in becoming a CityCast DC neighbor, head to membership.citycast.fm/CityCastDC. It's only $10 a month or $100 for the year. And if you join this week, you get a super cute tote. I have it. I love it. I can confirm it is a great tote. That's membership.citycast.fm/CityCastDC. Thanks so much. We deeply appreciate y'all.
You also talked, I mean, sort of, I guess we're going back to money. There was an Israeli exhibition after commemorating October 7th. And you see the leadership saying to the mostly Jewish crowd, like, you'd better pay up or else. What was going on in that scene?
Yeah. So we had organized an exhibition to commemorate the October 7th attacks in the Israeli Lounge, which is another one of these lounges that a country had gifted to the Kennedy Center. I had worked really hard to put this exhibition together, and we hosted an opening reception so that people could be invited into the space and view the work for the first time. And as part of the opening remarks, Rick Grinnell came before this assembled audience and essentially wagged a finger and in the face of all of them and said, you know, all of these lounges are up for sale. And, you know, it'd be a shame for this to no longer be the Israeli Lounge. So if you all in the audience want to keep this as the Israeli Lounge, then you're going to have to pony up. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing and summarizing. The full remarks were covered by the Jewish Insider. A reporter happened to be in the room and recorded them. But it was just mortifying for me to have to follow that and try to bring this space back to this very solemn observance. And I just felt that that was very tacky and quite offensive.
Now, you've mentioned these lounges in the Kennedy Center, it is an arts organization. You got to raise money. Some of the stuff you do to raise money makes you kind of cringe. But in this case, this idea of like countries sponsoring lounges, which given, you know, the Kansas City Arts Center or whatever, the head of that is not the head of the government of the country who can be sucked up to. So you also write about the sort of presence of some pretty unsavory governments in this mix.
Right. There was a long empty room on the terrace level of the Kennedy Center. When I was made aware of it, I had internally proposed that this was the new gallery, the home of the visual arts program that I was there to build. And then a different, you know, Grinnell hire, a deputy that he had installed, ended up basically taking that room out from under me and drawing up a list of, you know, Middle Eastern countries to basically solicit for donations. That space was ultimately sold to Kazakhstan. There were different names on that list, like Qatar, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, of course, had a widely reported $100 million deal with the Met Opera that was in the works at the time. And their embassy is, you know, right next door to the Kennedy Center. But nonetheless, there was this whole list of different countries. Azerbaijan, I think, was on that list as well.
How much were they paying for this?
I believe that Kazakhstan paid $15 million for the naming rights to that lounge for 5 years.
And is that lounge, like, I am a citizen of the United States, which owns the Kennedy Center. Can I go into that lounge if I feel like it?
You can, yeah.
And what do I see when I go there?
That remains to be seen. The last I saw that space, it was still vacant. Construction had not really started yet. To your earlier question about the lounges themselves and raising money, and institutions like the Kennedy Center need to raise money, the reality is, for over 50 years, a succession of leaders of the Kennedy Center had maintained and preserved these lounges in the name of cultural diplomacy. So, you know, Rick Grinnell comes in and he starts slapping corporate names on them, like the Cyberjets Lounge, which is next to the Opera House. And then there's a very shady character, Gaurav Srivastava, who bought the African Room. So the African Room doesn't even exist anymore. I found that to be a desecration of the space, especially of these lounges and the legacy of cultural diplomacy that has long been associated with the Kennedy Center.
It's a funny thing because these folks are often accused of being these sort of evil geniuses, but there was not a lot of genius on display in the piece you wrote. I mean, you talk about when Trump came to do the thing with FIFA, where he was, he got the FIFA Peace Prize. All of a sudden, a lot of shows have to get canceled. No one tells anybody.
That's correct. So the FIFA came the same weekend that the Kennedy Center honors were taking place. So we had FIFA, I think it was that Friday. Kennedy Center honors were the Sunday of all the same weekend. And I remember the staff had been, at the office, we were working. Some folks were watching the remarks from the Oval Office with President Trump. And he made a declaration in front of the media that, FIFA would be coming to the Kennedy Center for the World Cup draw. And I remember speaking to colleagues who had not been told that this was going to be the case. And so now they were scrambling to try to figure out, where to relocate National Symphony Orchestra performances. The Washington National Opera was still in residence at the Kennedy Center. They had shows that needed to be moved. There were touring productions that needed to be moved or canceled. And so we ended up losing quite a bit of money as a result of this snap decision to have FIFA at the Kennedy Center.
And listen, you said at the top that they had respected their promise to you to not step on creative control. But you also describe some moments of creative interference that are less like dogmatic than just bizarro, like where they're proposing a kind of America's Got Talent type thing.
Yeah.
What was that?
Well, fortunately, that was not ever going to be part of my portfolio. I didn't have any problem with them exerting any kind of control over my projects. What I did have a challenge with was that I just wasn't resourced to develop any of my projects. I didn't get any internal budget approval. I couldn't get any senior leaders to even care enough to support my projects. And I was there to develop exhibitions for America at 250. That was the biggest challenge I had. It wasn't anybody specifically coming down on me and having to be under their thumb. There was an instance where I received a text message from the chief of staff, Rick Grinnell's body man, essentially, and he had sent me a photo. He sent me the contact to an artist, the phone number to an artist based in LA, Manhattan Beach, where Rick Grinnell has a home. And then he sent me a photo of this artist's work on a wall. And then the text read, he was basically saying, this artist, Rick Grinnell, just bought the piece hanging on his wall. Why don't you reach out and see if we can, do an exhibition at the Kennedy Center with this artist? The subtext to that, of course, is that, if an institution like the Kennedy Center were to show this artist's work, it would then inflate the value of that artist's work. I did not feel ethically comfortable with that. I chose to ignore the text message. I never spoke of it. And fortunately, it was never brought up to me again. But that's probably the only example I have of anybody trying to tell me what to do.
What would you say was like the moment when you were like, all right, this is not normal? How long did it take after you got in there?
Well, I have to say it was probably the end of August when I was told by someone who was senior to me that the CFO had been internally proposing that we close the Kennedy Center under the guise of renovations because they had basically just, squandered the finances. We were broke. And so the idea at that time was to close the Kennedy Center at the end of September because October 1st would be the new fiscal year. And it's my understanding that Rick Grinnell did not agree to that because he still wanted to do FIFA. He still wanted to do the Kennedy Center honors. When I heard in January that we were closing for 2 years for renovations, I immediately knew what that meant. It meant that the Kennedy Center is broke. They bankrupted it.
So the renovations is just a story.
There are renovations that need to happen. The roof has been leaking for years. There's a lot of back of the house. Underneath the Kennedy Center are these passageways that the crews use to get between the stages. A lot of those sort of back of the house areas are in need of repair, but it's nothing that would require a full campus closure. For example, the Reach, which is the new extension that was opened in 2019.
Which those guys hate.
Right. That building is not actually owned by the federal government. It's owned by the Kennedy Center Trust, which is, again, this 501c3 independent nonprofit that administers the programming and operations of the Kennedy Center. So none of the congressional funds for the renovations would ever be used for that building anyway, on top of the fact that it's a brand new building that is not in need of renovations. However, it's going to be closed as part of these renovations, meaning no programming will be happening in it. We, the programmers, originally proposed that we keep the Reach open so that we could bring our projects there, and we were told no. And it's my understanding that another aspect to this closure is to run down the clocks on the collective bargaining agreements with the various unions at the Kennedy Center, so that when it does reopen, it will be the largest performing arts venue in America with no union representation.
He eventually left, but during this time, the other thing that's happening as far as the general public knows is there's all these stories about houses being empty, the administration going way out of its way to paper the house with like freebies for staff and friends and so on. You are a person who's out there as part of DC's arts community. You came to DC to work in arts and culture. What's it like to be an employee? Like, you go out, you meet someone at a party, and you tell them where you work.
Well, I remember when I first started telling friends that I was going to be, heading to the Kennedy Center, there was a lot of surprise. I was able to explain myself and why I wanted to go, which was quite simply that I wanted to try to help and save what I could, especially if I had this opportunity to build something. Many people likened the Kennedy Center to a burning building. And so they were running out, running away, evacuating. I sort of viewed myself as a first responder in a way where I wanted to run towards the building and try to help and save some things. And so once I was able to essentially explain that to friends and people in my community, they understood, and there was a bit of like cautious optimism. I had one friend tell me that he viewed me as a Nazi collaborator, which, I was hurt by, but that friend has since apologized and we're all good.
So when did you realize, like, I may be a first responder, but I'm not saving this building, and decide to call it quits?
I held on as long as I could until I was basically laid off with dozens of other colleagues. I was trying to save the permanent collection. I was slow walking that directive from Rick Grinnell to get rid of everything in the building. And I think my coming forward has brought a lot of attention to that directive. And I think that it's holding the Kennedy Center accountable now to what's going to happen with that art.
As far as you know, what is going to happen?
So I've heard through media reports in response to me coming forward, the Kennedy Center has issued a statement saying that artworks are being moved off campus for safekeeping during the renovations. To me, that sounds great to have it, taken off-site for safekeeping, but it doesn't also confirm that things are coming back. That's my response to their response is like, I think that you should assure the American people of what's going to happen with that art that was gifted to them by way of the Kennedy Center.
And does this include, when you're in the lobby, there's that enormous sculpture of JFK's head?
So I remember when I was given the directive to, get rid of everything, I went straight to the general counsel and I said, this was what was told to me. Does that also include the bust of Kennedy, this 8-foot bust in the grand foyer? And I'll never forget it, but the general counsel's eyes got wide and he said, don't bring this up to Grinnell anymore. My office will handle it from here. And to this day, the general counsel's office, in my absence, are now overseeing the art collection.
Before I let you go, what kind of response have you gotten? Have you heard from Grinnell or from anybody in the inner circle?
I have not heard from Rick Grinnell. It's been very interesting that there have not been any denials that are issued by the Kennedy Center in response to anything that I've brought forward, especially with them bankrupting the Kennedy Center, as I've said. So I think that's almost a statement in itself that they haven't denied anything. But I've also heard from a lot of conservatives who have told me that I did a great thing and that I'm patriotic for speaking up. And a big part of why I've chosen to speak up and speak out is because I think that this needs to be the red line. We can never again allow political interference of our public arts institutions from either the right or the left. And, this being the 250th anniversary of America's founding, I think this is an opportunity for all of us to sort of reaffirm and uphold our commitments to, speech and creative expression totally free from political interference. I think my story that I shared in The Atlantic is intended to be a cautionary tale of what can happen when you have political interference to this level. I think there were also fair criticisms that some had of the political interference they saw of the Kennedy Center before Grinnell. So I just think once and for all, we need to get all of the politics out of our public arts institutions.
Look, the Kennedy Center, it's 50 years old, a little bit more. The working arts community in Washington has always had a little bit of a schizophrenic relationship with it, where, they don't think it's that cool because it's sort of the big establishment thing. But it has had a role here and has also been a magnet for talent. Like people like yourself might not live in Washington if not for jobs there. What do you hope happens there in these couple of years of renovation and afterwards?
I really hope that when the Kennedy Center reopens, that we collectively have learned from this experience and we have, gotten Congress to enact the firewalls that I feel are necessary to prevent future political interference. Again, this is a cautionary tale of what can happen when you allow, the Kennedy Center, our national cultural center, to be politicized. And the reason why I'm speaking out is exactly that. I'm trying to sound alarms. I'm trying to galvanize some kind of collective and corrective action here.
Josef, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mike, for having me. And I appreciate your longstanding care for our cultural heritage and institutions here in DC.
Before we go, we've got a ton of new neighbors to shout out. So thank you so much. Lauren W., Sarah G., Cheyenne H., Allie B., Richard S., Justin G., Susan W., Aaron E., Cindy F., Karen C., Emily N., and Steve E. And again, if you want to become a member, go to membership.citycast.fm. And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.